You think you can do this? The alien's voice was thick with disbelief, watching the human stretch before him. You're about to find out. Jack Mitchell cracked his neck, the weight of the moment settling in. He had trained for months, but this was different. 5x Earth gravity. He had only one goal: run. The alien officials didn't believe him. To them, humans were fragile. They thought he'd collapse before the first lap. He took a deep breath, the air heavy with the strange atmosphere of the alien world, his heart pounding in anticipation. Let's see what you're made of, one of the alien commanders said, his purple skin reflecting the harsh sunlight. Jack stepped onto the starting line, feeling the pull of gravity nearly crush him. He could already feel his legs protesting, but he gritted his teeth and set his eyes on the horizon. With a sharp exhale, he took off, each stride feeling like a battle against the very planet itself. His muscles screamed, but he kept moving, faster and faster, defying the odds. The alien crowd stood silent, their eyes wide with disbelief as the human kept pushing, each step harder than the last. No one had ever attempted this before. They had no idea a human could even survive this kind of punishment, let alone thrive under it. The seconds stretched, the sound of Jack's feet hitting the ground echoing in his ears, louder than his own heartbeat. Sweat dripped down his face, his vision blurry, but he pushed through. There was no turning back now. He wasn't here to prove anything to the aliens. He was here to prove something to himself. As he rounded the final bend, his legs shaking, the finish line in sight, he glanced up at the aliens watching from the sidelines. They were starting to realize, maybe they had underestimated him. Jack pushed forward one last time, summoning every last ounce of strength. His body was on fire, but he refused to slow down. He crossed the finish line, chest heaving, every muscle screaming in protest. The alien officials stared at him in stunned silence. One of them stepped forward, holding a datapad. "This is unacceptable," he said, scanning Jack's vitals. "You violated safety protocols. A formal complaint has been filed." Jack's breath came in ragged gasps, but he managed to grin. "I'll take my chances," he said. The aliens had no idea what they had just witnessed, how far a human could push their limits. This wasn't just a race. This was a statement. And Jack Mitchell had just delivered it loud and clear. Jack's breath came in short, sharp gasps as he stood, legs shaking beneath him. The alien officials stood in stunned silence, their eyes locked on him. One of them, a tall being with violet skin and silver eyes, took a step forward. "You've broken our safety regulations," he said, his voice surprisingly calm given the situation. Jack wiped sweat from his brow, feeling the heat of the alien sun on his face. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. He had proven his point. The other aliens exchanged nervous glances, murmuring among themselves. They had expected failure. They had expected him to collapse under the pressure of their gravity, to fall in defeat before the first lap. Instead, they were staring at a human who had not only survived but had pushed through it like it was just another day. The alien with the datapad scrolled through Jack's data, his brows furrowed in confusion. His vitals, they're stabilizing. He looked up from the screen, disbelief etched across his features. "This is impossible." Another official, a creature with translucent wings, fluttered nervously. "What are we supposed to do now? This wasn't supposed to happen." Jack turned to face them, his chest rising and falling with each labored breath. "You filed a complaint," he said hoarsely, "but I still finished. I still ran." The aliens were silent, staring at him. They had seen strength before, but nothing like this. This human, small by their standards, had just defied the laws of nature itself. The one who had been scanning his vitals now stepped back, looking around at the others. "We underestimated him," he muttered, as if trying to convince himself. Jack wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, a smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. "Welcome to humanity," he said, his voice hoarse but confident. "We never back down. We never stop." The officials looked at each other, unsure of what to do next. They had no protocol for this. No rulebook that covered how to handle a human who had just outperformed everything they thought they knew about their own strength. One of them, a female with shimmering gold skin, finally spoke. "We need to report this to the council," she said. "This changes everything." Jack's expression softened for a moment, as he straightened up, trying to ignore the fatigue that was still coursing through his body. "Don't worry," he said. turning away from them and starting to walk toward the exit. I'll be long gone before that happens. As he left the room, the murmurs of the aliens faded into the background. He had done what no one thought was possible. And now, the question lingered in the air. What would they do now that they knew the full extent of human determination? Would they accept it? Or would they try to stop it? Jack didn't care. The race was over. But the war for humanity's place in the galaxy had just begun. Jack stepped off the transport ship and into the bustling alien city, the sounds of unfamiliar languages and the hum of alien technology filling the air. His body ached from the previous day's run, but there was no time to rest. He had made his mark, but that was just the beginning. The aliens still couldn't wrap their heads around what he had done, and the council was calling for a meeting. They had to figure out what to do with a human who had defied their understanding of biology. Jack didn't care about their rules or their doubts. He was here for a purpose, to prove to them that humanity had a place in this galaxy. He walked through the streets, his eyes scanning the unfamiliar sights. Towering buildings with shifting, crystalline surfaces reflected the sunlight, and streets lined with vendors selling strange foods and artifacts stretched out before him. The aliens who passed by gave him curious glances, but none dared to approach. They had seen his run. They knew who he was now. The city felt alive with energy, but Jack couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. He had crossed their line. He had pushed their limits. And now they were waiting for him to fail. He reached the council hall, a massive structure made of dark metal and glowing blue light. Guards stood at attention as he approached, their eyes scanning him. "Human," one of them said, his voice cold and clipped. "The council awaits you." Jack nodded, taking a deep breath as he entered the hall. The room was grand, with high ceilings and holographic screens projecting star maps across the walls. The council members sat at a long table, their eyes focused on him. One by one, they regarded him with a mix of suspicion and awe. The one with purple skin and silver eyes, the one who had filed the complaint, spoke first. "You've proven your strength, human," he said, his voice low. "But strength alone does not guarantee survival in this galaxy. You will need more than that if you wish to be accepted." Jack stood tall, meeting the alien's gaze. "I'm not here to be accepted," he said firmly. "I'm here to prove that humanity belongs." The council murmured, exchanging looks. The one with translucent wings leaned forward, her expression thoughtful. "You are brave, I'll give you that. But your actions have consequences. You have set a precedent. What if other humans attempt the same? What if they fail?" Jack's eyes narrowed. "Then they fail. But they won't stop trying. That's what makes us different." A pause followed, the tension in the room palpable. Finally, the leader of the council, a tall alien with shimmering gold skin, spoke. "We will allow you to remain here, human. But understand this, you are not alone. There will be more tests, more challenges. If you succeed, humanity may find its place in this galaxy. If you fail." She left the sentence unfinished, but the meaning was clear. Jack nodded, a small smirk on his lips. "I'll take my chances." As he turned to leave, he knew one thing for certain. This was just the beginning. The universe was vast, and humanity was only getting started. The days that followed felt like a blur to Jack. He spent his time training harder than ever, pushing his body to its limits and beyond, preparing for whatever challenge the aliens would throw at him next. The council had made it clear, more tests awaited him. And Jack wasn't about to back down. He had made a promise to himself, to humanity, that they would not be overlooked. He had already done the impossible, but there was more to prove. Walking through the alien city, Jack noticed how much things had changed in such a short time. The same alien faces that had once looked at him with disbelief now regarded him with a mix of curiosity and wariness. He wasn't just a human anymore. He was the human, the one who had outrun their expectations. There were whispers as he passed, his every step scrutinized. Some of the aliens still doubted his abilities, but others had begun to see him in a different light. Jack wasn't just a curiosity. He was a symbol that humanity could rise above, that they could compete on equal footing with other species, even in a universe as vast and dangerous as this one. Jack had learned one thing during his time here. The Alien Council wasn't just testing his physical limits. They were testing his resolve. Every test was a challenge not just to his body, but to his will. They wanted to know if humanity could withstand the pressure, if they could survive in this strange and hostile galaxy. And Jack was determined to show them that they could. The next challenge came sooner than he expected. A message was sent to his quarters early one morning, the words flashing on his screen, "Prepare yourself. You will be tested on your intellect." Jack frowned. He had known the tests wouldn't just be physical, but he hadn't expected this. His mind raced with the possibilities. What kind of test could they be planning? Was this another physical challenge disguised as something else? Or was it a true test of his intellect, something that would force him to think outside the box? He dressed quickly, his mind running through every possible scenario. When he arrived at the testing chamber, the alien council was already seated, their expressions unreadable. The leader of the council, the one with the shimmering gold skin, stood up to address him. "Human," she said, her voice calm but firm, "you have proven your strength. But now we will see if you possess the intellect necessary to thrive in this galaxy. You will be given a task that will require both mental and physical endurance. Fail, and you will be removed from the trials." Jack nodded, his jaw set. He had faced physical challenges before, but this would be different. The leader motioned, and a series of holographic screens flickered to life around him. The task was simple: solve a series of increasingly complex puzzles while navigating a dangerous and unpredictable terrain. The first puzzle appeared, and Jack dove in without hesitation, his mind working through the patterns and calculations. As the puzzles grew more difficult, his focus never wavered. He had trained his mind just as hard as his body. But the terrain around him began to shift, making it harder to focus. Alien machinery and hazards popped up randomly, forcing Jack to dodge and weave as he continued to solve the puzzles. Sweat trickled down his face, but he refused to stop. Every time he solved a puzzle, the next one appeared, harder than the last. But he pushed through, his mind sharp, his resolve even sharper. With each step, Jack proved to the council that humanity was more than just physical strength. They were capable of far more than they realized. And when the final puzzle was solved, Jack stood tall, breathing heavily, but with a sense of triumph. The aliens remained silent for a long time. Then, the leader of the council spoke again, her voice tinged with something Jack couldn't quite place. "You have passed," she said. "You have shown us not just strength, but intellect. You are ready for the next step." Jack's heart raced. This was just the beginning. He had made it through the first trial, but there were still many more to come. But one thing was clear: humanity had a place in this galaxy, and Jack Mitchell was determined to fight for it. The days blurred together as Jack prepared for the next trial. He knew what was coming. The council had made it clear: the tests would continue, and each one would be more difficult than the last. But Jack didn't hesitate. He couldn't afford to. The weight of humanity's hopes rested on his shoulders. His training was relentless. Every waking moment was spent preparing, studying, learning, and pushing his body to its limits. The alien world around him, with its advanced technology and vast knowledge, was a place where humans were seen as weak. And Jack was determined to change that perception. The next challenge came without warning. One morning, he received a message. "Prepare yourself, human. The next test awaits." The words were simple, but the tone was anything but. The message was a reminder that nothing would come easy. He had passed the physical and intellectual tests, but the council's eyes were still on him. When he arrived at the designated location, the room was different from the others. It was vast, empty, and cold, with a giant holographic screen. In the center of the room, the council members were seated, watching him closely. The leader, the one with gold skin, stood up and addressed him. "This is your final test," she said, her voice low and serious. "We will test your leadership. You will face a crisis, and you must guide your team to resolve it. Failure is not an option." Jack's heart raced, but his face remained calm. Leadership? He wasn't sure what to expect. He had led teams before, but nothing like this. This wasn't just a test of his abilities. It was a test of his ability to inspire others, to show that humanity could lead, not just follow. The holographic screen lit up, showing a simulation of an alien city under attack. Buildings were collapsing, fires were raging, and chaos was everywhere. "You have 1 hour," the leader said. "You will guide a team of 4 alien beings through this crisis. Make the right decisions, and your team will survive. Make the wrong ones, and they will fail. You will not be given a second chance." Jack nodded, taking a deep breath. This was it. He stepped forward, his mind racing as he tried to assess the situation. He could see the team members on the screen, each with their own strengths and weaknesses. One was a skilled engineer, another was a tactical expert, and the other two were civilians who were scared and unsure. Jack's job was simple: to make them a team, to make them believe they could survive. He began issuing orders, each one calculated, each one designed to build trust and unity among the team. Engineer, I need you to stabilize the power grid, Jack commanded. Tactical, set up a perimeter and prepare for any threats. The civilians were hesitant, but Jack didn't give them a choice. You're with the engineer. Help them however you can. He could feel the weight of their doubt. They didn't trust him. They didn't know him. But Jack didn't falter. He kept his voice steady, his decisions clear. The minutes ticked by as the team worked together, slowly making progress. The fires were contained, the buildings were stabilized, and the chaos was brought under control. Jack didn't allow himself to celebrate. Not yet. He couldn't afford to let his guard down. As the final minutes approached, the city was still in danger, but they were ready to evacuate. We've got this, the tactical expert said, a hint of respect in his voice. Thanks to you. Jack nodded, his chest tightening with relief. The simulation ended, and the holographic screen flickered out. The council was silent, their eyes studying him. Finally, the leader spoke. You have passed. You have shown that humanity is capable of leadership. We will recommend that your people be given a place in this galaxy. Jack felt a surge of pride, but it was quickly replaced by something else. This was just one test, and there were many more to come. He wasn't done yet. Humanity wasn't done yet. And no matter what the council said, Jack Mitchell knew one thing for sure. The future of humanity in this galaxy was only beginning. Jack had expected the trials to push him to his limits, but nothing could have prepared him for the gravity of the decision that awaited him next. The council had been watching him, observing not only his physical and mental capabilities, but his character. They had seen him rise above their expectations time and time again, but now, it was time for a decision that would affect the fate of all of humanity. It had been several days since his leadership trial, and Jack had been summoned to a private chamber deep within the council's headquarters. The room was sterile and quiet, filled with holographic displays of distant galaxies and star systems. The council members were seated at a large, circular table, their faces stern, but there was something different in the air. The usual tension seemed heavier today. Jack entered the room, his mind racing with questions. He had passed every test, each one more difficult than the last. He had shown them that humanity could lead, could think, and could endure. But now, the council's gaze was more focused, more intense than ever. The leader of the council, the one with gold skin and sharp, calculating eyes, stood as Jack approached. Human, she began, her voice steady, but with an underlying tone that Jack couldn't quite place. You have shown us much. Your strength, your intellect, your leadership. You have proven that humanity is capable of far more than we initially believed. Jack nodded, but he could feel the weight of the moment pressing on him. What came next? What more could they want from him? The leader continued, her voice cutting through his thoughts. However, we face a choice that will determine humanity's place in the galaxy. You have demonstrated your worth, but there is another test, a final one. We must know if humanity is ready to stand alongside the other species in this universe, or if you are simply a species that will be a fleeting curiosity. Jack's heart pounded. A final test? He had been through so much already, but he knew what this meant. This was the moment. This was what it all came down to. The leader raised her hand, and the room darkened, the holographic displays flickering to life once again. This test is not one you can pass with strength alone, she said. It is a test of your people. You will lead a delegation to an alien world, where you will negotiate an alliance with a species that has remained isolated for millennia. If you succeed, humanity will be welcomed into the fold of galactic civilization. If you fail, she let the words hang in the air. Jack didn't need her to finish the sentence. He understood the stakes. This was more than just a personal victory. This was about the future of humanity. I'll do it, Jack said, his voice firm, unwavering. He had no doubts, no hesitation. This was his purpose. The leader nodded, her expression unreadable. We will prepare you, but you must be ready. Your mission will take you to a remote star system, far beyond our usual reach. You will be on your own, without backup. The decision of whether humanity is ready will rest on your shoulders. Jack felt the weight of her words, but he didn't flinch. He wasn't afraid. He had proven himself in every test, and now he would prove humanity's worth to the galaxy. "I'm ready," he said, his voice filled with conviction. The council members exchanged looks, and Jack could see a flicker of something in their eyes, respect, perhaps even awe. The leader stepped forward, handing him a small data chip. "This contains the details of your mission. You leave at once. The fate of your species depends on your success." Jack took the chip, his mind already racing with the possibilities. This was it, the moment that would define humanity's future. And he wasn't going to fail. Not now. Not ever. Jack stood at the edge of the transport bay, staring at the sleek, black ship that would carry him to the distant star system. His heart was pounding, but there was no room for fear. He had come this far, and failure was no longer an option. He had always known this moment would come, the moment when he would face not only the alien council, but also the galaxy itself. The doors to the ship hissed open, and Jack stepped inside, his mind running through the details of the mission. The data chip given to him by the council was secure in his pocket, containing the most crucial information: the location of the alien species he was to meet, and the diplomatic protocols required to establish an alliance. It sounded simple enough, but Jack knew better. He had been trained for physical and mental endurance, but this was different. This was diplomacy. This was about convincing an alien species that humanity could be trusted, that they were worthy of a place in this vast, unforgiving galaxy. The ship's engines hummed to life, and Jack settled into his seat, strapping in for the long journey ahead. The stars outside the window stretched into lines as the ship entered faster than light travel, a sensation Jack had grown used to. Time passed in a blur, and before he knew it, the ship was approaching the star system. The destination appeared on the holographic screen before him, a planet shrouded in a thick atmosphere, its surface covered in sprawling cities and vast jungles. This was the homeworld of the alien species he was to negotiate with, the Valorians. They had remained isolated for centuries, and the Council had made it clear that their cooperation would open new doors for humanity. But Jack knew that the Valorians would not be easily swayed. Their history was one of mistrust, and they had never interacted with other species. His mission would be to change that. The ship's descent into the planet's atmosphere was smooth, but Jack could feel the weight of the task ahead. As the ship touched down on the landing pad, he took a deep breath. This was the moment. The door to the ship opened, and Jack stepped onto the planet's surface. The air was thick with humidity, and the scent of alien plants filled his nostrils. He adjusted his gear, his hand brushing over the communication device. That would keep him in contact with the Council. He didn't expect to need it, but the weight of the device reminded him that this was a high-stakes mission. As he walked toward the waiting delegation of Valorian representatives, Jack couldn't help but notice how different they were from the beings he had encountered before. Tall and elegant, their skin shimmered with an iridescent glow, their eyes glowing faintly with a pale blue hue. They stood motionless, watching him with an expression that seemed more curious than hostile. One of the Valorians, a tall female with silver hair and eyes like liquid crystal, stepped forward. She was the leader of their delegation, and Jack could sense the power she held. "Human," she said, her voice like a melody. "You are the first of your kind to set foot on our world. Why should we trust you?" Jack met her gaze, his heart steady. "Because humanity has earned that trust," he replied. "We are a species capable of great things, but we are also a species that knows the value of cooperation. We can offer you something no one else can, a future together, where we all rise, not as enemies, but as allies." The Valorian leader studied him for a long moment, and Jack could feel the weight of her judgment. The silence between them stretched out, but he didn't back down. "We have no need for allies," she said finally, her voice cold. "We have thrived alone for millennia." Jack's mind raced, but he kept his composure. "Then let me prove that we can offer something more," he said, his voice calm but firm. "Allow us to show you the strength of humanity, the strength of what we can achieve together. I promise you, we will not disappoint you." The Valorian leader remained silent for a moment, then nodded slowly. "You may have your chance, human, but be warned, failure is not an option. If you fail, your species will never be welcomed here again." Jack nodded, knowing that the stakes had never been higher. This was it. The fate of humanity, the future of an entire species, rested on the outcome of this moment. And Jack Mitchell wasn't going to let humanity fail. Not now. Not ever. The days following Jack's arrival on the Valorian homeworld were tense, filled with meetings and discussions that left little room for rest. The delegation, though initially wary, had slowly warmed to him. He was proving himself, step by step, showing them the best humanity had to offer. But the final challenge still loomed. The Valorian leader had given him one last opportunity to prove his worth, an opportunity to broker a critical alliance, an alliance that could reshape the future of both their species. Jack stood before a massive hall filled with Valorian representatives. His palms were sweaty, but his face was calm. He had been through countless trials, and each had been harder than the last. This, however, felt different. This wasn't about strength or intellect. This was about trust. He had earned their respect in the trials, but trust was something that had to be built over time, something that had to be nurtured. The leader, still as unreadable as when they first met, stood at the head of the room, her piercing blue eyes fixed on Jack. "Human," she began, her voice ringing through the hall. "You have proven yourself capable of much, but now you must prove that you can lead us into a future where we stand together, not as strangers, but as equals." The weight of her words sank into Jack. He wasn't just speaking for himself anymore. He was speaking for all of humanity. The room fell silent as the Valorians waited for him to respond. "I am not here to make empty promises," Jack said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "Humanity has always been a species that rises to the occasion. We may not have the history or the advanced technology that others do, but what we have is something far more valuable. We have determination. We have the will to push through any obstacle. And most importantly, we have the capacity to learn, to grow, and to work together toward a common goal." His words echoed in the hall, and Jack could see the subtle shifts in the Valorians' expressions. Some of them seemed uncertain, others intrigued. But it was the leader's reaction that mattered most. She stepped forward, her gaze piercing through him. "You claim that humanity has the capacity to learn. Prove it. We will give you one last challenge. A test not of strength or intellect, but of your ability to unite us." Jack felt his pulse quicken. "What do you ask of me?" The leader's eyes softened slightly. "You will go to the heart of our civilization, to our capital city. There, you will hold a council with our people, including those who have opposed our joining with your species. If you can convince them that this alliance is worth pursuing, then humanity will have proven itself worthy. But if you fail, we will walk away, and your species will remain in the shadows of the galaxy." The weight of the challenge hit Jack like a physical blow. This was no longer just about surviving the trials. This was about shaping the future of humanity, about forging a path for his people in a galaxy that had once regarded them as insignificant. Jack didn't hesitate. He stepped forward, his gaze locked on the Valorian leader. "I accept," he said firmly, "and I will make this alliance happen." The leader nodded, her expression unreadable. "We will see." Jack turned to face the rest of the delegation. The challenge was clear, but Jack knew that this was what he had been training for all along. It wasn't just about passing tests or proving his strength. It was about bringing people together, about showing the galaxy that humanity wasn't just capable of surviving, it was capable of thriving. As Jack made his way toward the capital city, he knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but he was ready to prove that humanity, no matter how small or young, could make its mark on the galaxy. Jack stood in front of the grand doors that led to the Valorian Council Hall. This was the moment that would define not just his future, but the future of humanity. He had spent so many days preparing for this very moment, but now that it was here, there was no room for doubt. The delegation had already gathered, the most influential members of Valorian society sitting in their towering chairs, watching him with a mix of curiosity and skepticism. The room was vast, with walls lined with iridescent stones that shimmered in the light, casting an ethereal glow. Jack could feel the weight of their gazes upon him. He had always been able to handle pressure, but this was different. This wasn't just another test. This was the culmination of everything he had fought for. His heart raced, but he forced himself to remain calm. He had to speak, to convince them that this alliance was not only possible, but essential. He had no idea what the council would throw at him, but he wasn't going to back down. As he walked toward the center of the room, he could hear the low murmurs of the Valorians. The air was thick with tension, the silent judgment hanging over him like a storm cloud. When Jack reached the podium, the leader of the council, the same one who had tested him time and again, stood and addressed him. "Human," she began, her voice like ice. "You stand here today because of your strength, your intellect, and your leadership. But now, you face the greatest challenge of all, convincing us that your species can be trusted. We have lived in isolation for millennia. We have thrived without interference. Why should we open our borders to humanity now?" Jack met her gaze without hesitation. "Because humanity understands the value of trust. We know what it means to fight for survival, to rise from the ashes when it seems impossible. We are not a perfect species, but we are a resilient one. We learn from our mistakes, and we strive to do better. The galaxy is vast, and there is so much we can learn from each other. But that only happens when we are willing to come together, to share our knowledge, our resources, and our strengths." There was a pause, and Jack could feel the weight of the silence pressing in on him. The Valorians were not quick to make decisions, and he knew this was just as much about proving his character as it was about proving his people's worth. The leader looked at him, her expression unreadable. "And what of our fears, human? What if humanity cannot live up to the promises you make? What if your species is a danger to us, as so many others have claimed?" Jack took a deep breath, gathering his thoughts. "I cannot promise that humanity is perfect," he said, his voice steady. "But I can promise that we will never stop striving to be better. We will never stop reaching for something greater. You are right to have doubts, to question us. That is the first step toward building something real. And we are willing to prove ourselves, not just with words, but with actions." The room fell silent once again, the tension thickening with every passing second. The Valorian leader exchanged glances with the council members, her eyes narrowing slightly as she weighed his words. Then, slowly, she nodded. "Very well, human. You have proven your strength. You have shown us your will. But actions speak louder than words." She turned to the other council members, who nodded in agreement. "We will give you the chance you seek. We will allow your people to join us in the galaxy, but only if you can prove that humanity is ready for the challenges that lie ahead." Jack felt the weight of her words, the significance of what had just happened. This wasn't just a victory for him. This was a victory for humanity. But the road ahead would be long, and the council's approval was only the beginning. Jack straightened up, a sense of pride swelling in his chest. "Thank you," he said, his voice unwavering. "We will not disappoint you." As he walked out of the council hall, Jack felt a renewed sense of purpose. The galaxy had just opened its doors to humanity, and he was determined to make sure they walked through it with their heads held high. The journey had only just begun, and Jack Mitchell knew that no matter what came next, humanity would face it together, stronger than ever before.